Hey there, all my cool cats and kittens. We're coming at you again today from St. Augustine, Florida. Another beautiful sunny afternoon. So today we're going to do a little short lesson on paint, the different kinds of paint. And then instead of doing our typical art project, today we're actually going to make some watercolor paint. I figure by now you all may be running out of some art supplies and maybe need some more, so I thought today's activity would actually to help you be to make some more supplies so you can go paint to your heart's content. So we're going to start by talking about some of the types of paint. We're only going to talk about 4 types today. There's a lot more than that. We have watercolor, we have tempera, we have oil, and acrylic. All of these types of paint have 3 basic parts. The first part is a pigment, and that's just a big fancy word for the color that's in your paint. This next part they have is called the binder, and this is that thing that holds the paint together until it's actually on the surface. The way I like to think of a binder is it'd be like your eggs and your muffins or your cookies, or if you're vegan, it would be your applesauce. It's that thing that holds it all together so that you can actually cook it, or, you know, in this case, apply it to a piece of paper or apply it to a wall or a stone or whatever you're doing. There's another thing that some people refer to as the solvent or vehicle, and this is the means of which your paint is actually applied. So in watercolors, it would be water. We dip our brush in the water, we pull our paint, and then we put it on the paper. So the water is our vehicle in that instance. So we're going to start actually by talking about watercolor today. Watercolor paint has been around for a really long time. It actually dates way back. Some of the cave paintings are actually watercolor. They're ground up pigments that they then mixed with a binder and used white water and applied them to the stone because they were way back and safe from all the elements and didn't have a lot of sun sometimes, and definitely didn't have all the rain and all that. They lasted. Another interesting thing that I thought was watercolor was actually the Egyptians used it on their papyrus. So all of those beautiful paintings that we see in museums on the papyrus or that we may see online, those are actually watercolor paintings on those. Some advantages to watercolor is it uses water. So it cleans up really easily, just water, super easy. You can clean your brushes that way. If you make a mistake on your paper, you can just kind of re-wet it, and it actually helps lift the paint off of your paper. If you're using the tube watercolors, you can just put a little bit of paint in there, and boom, you're in business again. Some disadvantages is watercolor is very transparent, which means you can see through it. It's really hard to cover up mistakes. If you keep re-wetting it, you just kind of keep making it more transparent, and it actually becomes muddier. So watercolor can be a little bit difficult to work with because you really can't hide your mistakes. The other disadvantage is sometimes you see these beautiful, like over here, bright colors, and then you put on your paper and they're very soft and muted. So it doesn't come out as bright or as pigmented as some of the other types of paint. A really fun fact about watercolors is there's no white. The white that we see in watercolors is actually with our paper. Paper quality is also very important in watercolors. If I were trying to watercolor on this little flimsy piece of paper, it would just kind of become a soggy mess. So you want to try to use heavier weight paper. You can use other mediums, but if it's something really flimsy like this or can be dissolved with water, it's probably not a good idea. All right, so let's look at some examples of some watercolors. We have some Japanese koi fish here and a wonderful impression painting here. This is usually what we all think of when we think of watercolors. Very soft, very subtle, almost soothing and relaxing types of paintings, I guess to say. That's the way they make me feel. So I don't know, how do they make you feel? Do they make you feel excited? Do they make you feel kind of just relaxed? Art's like that. Can make us feel really neat things. So the next kind of paint we're going to cover today is called tempera paint. Tempera is what you use a lot in schools. It's really common, extremely affordable, which is why we see it in schools. You may or may not have it at your house. The tempera that you may think of is actually probably like the Crayola that you may see in the stores, tempera, and it just washes off your hands, which is a wonderful advantage because it is washable. It's also non-toxic. Does anyone know non-toxic? Basically, it means if you accidentally like eat it or ingest it, you're not gonna die. it'll be okay. Tempera paint will pretty much stick to most anything, and what's really great is once it's dry, it's nearly permanent. So if you make a mistake, you gotta fix that mistake before it's dry. Now you can paint over tempera. You're still gonna kind of see what's underneath, so you can make your painting in multiple layers. A lot of the really amazing artists from earlier, that's actually the way that they would use tempera. Some of the disadvantages of tempera is if you want to do that, it is really time consuming to paint in multiple layers. Tempera dries really fast, which is great when you're working with little kids and they don't have a lot of patience and you want your painting to dry really fast. It's a disadvantage if you're trying to blend your colors and you're taking your time doing it, and then you come back to your paper, it's dry. So it can be an advantage or a disadvantage. Another thing about tempera paint that I do want to say is that the binder is an egg binder, which is really interesting. So if you have old tempera paint and you open it up and whoo, it smells stinky, it actually means that your tempera paint is expired and you need to get some new tempera. It also means if you have a really, really severe dairy allergy, tempera paint may not be a good paint for you. So just be careful with that. All right, so let's look at some examples of tempera paint. Tempera paint was really popular in early religious art. Believe it or not, these amazingly, just beautifully detailed pieces. And here's a wonderful piece of landscape, actually, from, I believe that's from the Dutch golden age of art. They were done in many, many layers. So they would take their time, do one layer, do another, and they were able to create just such amazing detail with tempera paint. Okay, so let's move on to some oil paint. Now, I'll be honest, I've never used oil paint. I don't have the patience for it to dry, which is an advantage and disadvantage, obviously. But oil is actually, it can be linseed, it can be walnut, it can be sunflower oil, and the oil in there, because oil obviously does not dry fast, it makes it dry really, really, really slow, which is absolutely wonderful if you're blending or you need to take your time creating your painting. If you're like me, that's a disadvantage because I like things to kind of dry a little bit faster. The neat thing about oil painting too is that you can paint over it without disturbing the layers underneath. So you can go back and work in layers. You can work in thick layers, you can work in thin layers, you can really thin it out almost like a glaze, similar to like a watercolor, so it's very transparent. It has a lot of advantages. It does just dry really, really slowly, and it can be difficult to clean up. You definitely have to use special things to clean up your tools with that. One of the fun facts about oil is that they change color over time. So if your oils are like, say, in a dark place, they're actually going to get darker over time by not being exposed to the sunlight. So you may paint something and come back and it was in that dark hallway and you're like, I didn't think it was that dark. It's oil painting. So let's look at some really famous oil paintings here. They can be really detailed or actually can be very impressionistic. So here we have the girl with the pearl earring, and we also have a wonderful work of impression art. Now this is known for being such an amazingly detailed piece. It took him many, many, many years to paint his work. He actually didn't do a lot in his lifetime because he was so detailed oriented, and you can see the results. The pearl actually looks like a real pearl. So just quite amazing work with oil paints. All right. So now let's go on to acrylic paints. Acrylic paints is really the new kid on the block. It was really only invented in the 1940s. Acrylic paints are water soluble, which means you can use water and just wash out your brushes. Once you're done, you can wash your hands off real easily while it's wet. Now, disadvantage of acrylic paint is when acrylic dries, it's dry. It's nearly completely permanent. So if you let it dry on your brushes, it's going to be really, really hard to get out of your brushes. Now, again, when it dries, it's nearly permanent, so that could be an advantage. Acrylic paint is great to put on things that are outside because it'll rain and it's pretty much fine. So that is great. It does dry very fast, and so just like with tempera, we said that can be an advantage or a disadvantage. It can be used really, really thickly. You can kind of glop it on and let it dry, or you can paint it very thin. One of the really, really neat fun facts about acrylic paint is you can actually use it like a glue. So if you want your painting to be actually a collage where you're using sequins, or you're using maybe like torn pieces of construction paper, or even beads in there, your acrylic paint will hold it just like glue does. Yep, I think we covered everything on that one. That's pretty good. So let's look at, I think you're really going to recognize some of these. These are examples of acrylic paint. So again, obviously much more modern examples because it is a pretty new medium. All right, so now we are going to make some paint. All right, so let's get ready to make some paint. Are you ready? I have everything we're gonna need here. The other thing that you're gonna need is a place to hold your paints. So I have these handy dandy, they're like basically what you get from the takeaways for your salad dressings or your ketchup or something. I'm gonna be using those. You may have something neat like, let's see, the lighting isn't that good. There we go, get really close there. These cute little dishes here to put your colors in, especially if you have little kids. These will be like a one-time use. Wash them out when you're done. I have seen online some people actually use their cookie tins and pour their paints in there and just let the kids use that. The other thing, I am going to be mixing everything today in my glass measuring cup. Even though this does look really big, we only need 2 tablespoons of the white vinegar. When we add the baking soda, you're gonna see it's gonna fizz up. It kind of makes like a little volcano. So here we go. I'm also just using these lovely little tongue depressors, or whatever you want to call them. So as you see, it's definitely fizzing up. Okay, you're gonna want to add in slowly. I mean, you could add it all in fast and just have a really fun volcano, and then that could be your thing for the day. You could do that. I actually kind of see that as something that would happen at my house. All right, so it's really, 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 I'm gonna get it really close here. It's thick. Okay, very, very thick at this point. Okay, it's stopped. Okay, so I'm going to add the corn syrup next. I want to add the cornstarch last because it will, okay, I need a ½ teaspoon here. I want when the cornstarch last because that's really going to make it kind of thicken up. Now, corn syrup is really, 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 really sticky, and this is actually going to be our binder in this case. I'm going to take my little, scoop out all of it because you want it all. Make sure we get all of that in there. There we go. Okay, it's already starting to thicken up a little bit on me. Okay, mix that up really well. Okay, now if you just want one color, we're kind of getting closer to the point of doing just one color. I am going to add in the cornstarch. I don't know if I'm going to add it all in. We may not need it all. I've done this recipe a few times and it actually works really well with less than that amount of cornstarch. It just takes a little bit longer to dry. Okay, it's very, very, very thick right now. So, and you have to kind of keep scraping along the bottom because it's wanting to settle there on the bottom. I think we could use just a little bit more cornstarch in here. Okay, so I've used almost the whole thing, all 2 tablespoons. And like I said, it'll still work with even less than that. It just takes a little bit longer to dry. So it almost has like a glue, white glue kind of consistency to it. Can you see that? Yeah. Okay, so now food coloring time. So I have my food coloring here. If I want it all one color, I would just color in here. I don't want all one color. I actually want a few colors today. So I'm gonna put these out And I'm going to do one green, I'm going to do one blue, one yellow, one red, and you know, I'm going to be honest, I really like purple, so we're going to do one purple one. You can mix your food coloring and create other colors for yourself as well. So does anyone remember, like, what color how do I make purple? Do you remember? I'm going to use a red and a blue. Yep. So if you don't know what colors may make your favorite color, you can always look up online and it'll tell you. So you can just mix them right up. I could use these and transfer using this, which I'll probably show you that too. All right, I'm talking too much, it's getting too thick. All right, so we have all of our paints. You're just gonna literally let these, I'm gonna do one last little mix here, and you're gonna let all of these sit overnight. Mix. Make sure they're all nice and even. And sometime tomorrow, 24 hours usually, they will be completely dry and they will be ready to use as watercolors. So please feel free to do this as many times as you want at your house. And go paint. Yay! All right, we'll see you at our next kids art for some mosaics.